What's up, active RVers? This is Nutrition 101, and we're whipping up some steak tacos with homemade tortillas for lunch. So this is a really great, quick, easy recipe. There's only really 5 ingredients to make the tortillas, and then for the steaks, we like to use like a lean cut. So something like a sirloin or a New York strip, something with not a lot of fat content that has really rich, lean protein in it. You need some peppers and onions for veggies, and then cumin and paprika, a little bit of garlic powder, some salt, pepper. Bam, that is it. So for the homemade tortillas, I went ahead and pre-prep them and take a little bit of time, like something like 20 minutes to put together. So for filming purposes, I just wanted to streamline it, get them prepped, and then I'll show you how to form the tortilla, fry it up, and then while all of that good stuff is going on, we're gonna rock and roll with the steak tacos. So for the steak, like I said, something lean cut, a little bit of fat on it, that extra flavor and sizzle, that's always great. But then chopping up some onions, peppers. So let's go ahead and get this pan heated up. So using that olive oil spray, spraying that in there, throwing that steak. Good stuff. So we'll set this off to the side. Spray a little bit more olive oil in there. And then as far as seasonings go, so we have like a anything rub here that's got salt and pepper, some garlic. As far as the quantities go, you just throw some in there. So again, we're having fun, being creative. Not too much. You don't want the salt and pepper to be overbearing. And then so we'll throw some cumin. We got some paprika. All right, good stuff. Throw the lid on. We'll let that start getting fired up there. Now, as far as the tortillas go, so you need about 2.5 cups of flour. Again, depending on like the humidity of the room, where you're at in the country, it might actually dictate how much flour versus how much water you need. So you want kind of like a nice doughy, moldable dough that's going to be able to stretch out a little bit, but it's not going to stick a lot to your hands. So you're going to be able to kind of mold it, form it a little bit. And so the 2.5 cups of flour, you're going to want about a teaspoon of salt, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder. And then with the tortillas themselves, we like using olive oil. So about 2 to 3 tablespoons to get a little bit of fat content in there. And then somewhere around 3/4 cups of warm water. So you don't want it boiling, you don't want it cold. You want something that's going to be able to mix very well. You don't have to heat it up in the microwave or anything like that, but just warm water you get right out of the faucet here. And again, like I said, it's going to depend on the humidity. You just want to kind of play with it. So you might have to add a little bit of flour, you might have to add a little bit of water to go back and forth, but you throw it all into a mixing bowl, you sit there, you mix it up, and then you get your countertop. And so what we do here is just throw a little bit of flour down, and then you can kind of mold and knead that dough a little bit. It's not like a pizza crust or bread, so you don't have to go really crazy with it. But again, get it nice in a round surface here. And then what you want to do is I like to put the oven light on. I got a little pan. I put some olive oil on the pan. I throw the dough in that pan, throw a wet towel over top of it, let it hang out there for 10 to 15 minutes. That way it can settle. And then let me show you what we got. So I'm gonna have to knead it a little bit more here, but you can see the dough itself, you know, it stretches, but it a little bit sticks to your fingers, but it's not a lot. It's not like that goopy where you just grab a whole handful and it's like really, really sticking, kind of like, you know, really sticking to your fingers. It's almost like a Play-Doh. So some of you that had Play-Doh back in the day. So it's kind of like that kind of a texture. So you can see, you know, I got some olive oil in there. Again, it's sticking the hands a little bit, but we're just gonna kind of roll it back up. I got a little bit of flour on the table here because now what we're gonna do is, since we got this dough, you can see it's settled nice. We're gonna break off chunks of it into about a golf ball size chunk here. So we're rolling it up, something like that. We're gonna break off a couple chunks here to show you guys. And then what we're gonna wanna do is roll it out really nice and flat, just like you would see buying tortillas from the store. But I'm telling you what, these things are gonna be great. They're gonna have a little bit of a golden brown crisp to them whenever you take them out of the pan. Drop that one on the ground there. We'll salvage that here later. All right, we'll break a couple off again to kind of show you what they look like. So, with RVing, as you guys know, things break, so to speak. So you got to be adaptable. And our rolling pin actually broke on travel. I don't know how that happened, but it did. So I'm actually going to use a Yeti cup to get these things rolled out. So before we do that, our pan has to be piping hot in order to really sear that tortilla. So we're gonna get this pan rocking and rolling. Let me stir this steak that's happening in here. These peppers and onions are really nicely infusing into this steak. So it doesn't have to be complicated. You can add cilantro, you can add some lime, you can add chunks of garlic, whatever you guys want to do to spice up the steak or chicken, depending on if you want to cook some chicken or not. So we got the pan sizzling, almost up to high. So what we're gonna do is take a little bit of flour, spread it out on the counter here. Take our ball, because we don't want the little tortilla to stick too bad on either the rolling pin or the Yeti cup. So we're gonna stretch that out. And we're gonna kind of have to make these as we go, because if you stack these up on top of each other, that dough is gonna stick and it's not gonna form that tortilla very well. But you're not gonna get a perfect circle. That's all right. Life is not 100% perfect, so. But I can guarantee you, once we get these things fried up, they're gonna be delicious. As far as the macros go for calories, they're not too bad. So per taco, we're looking at about 225 calories total. About 12 to 15 grams of protein, depending on how much protein you throw in there. About 24 grams of carbs. You know, we are using flour and other things like that. So, you know, these are gonna have some carbs in them, which is good. This is not overly bearing. It's gonna fuel you for either a post-workout lunch or something, you know, or before a hike. And then about 8 grams of fat. Now, the fat is gonna be dependent on how lean the meat is. So if you're using something like chicken breast, you know, your fat quantity, quantity per taco might be 3 to 5. If you're using something like a ribeye or a fattier piece of meat, your fat content might be up to 15 grams per taco. So this one here, we're using lean New York strip. So probably about that 8 to 10, something like that. And so again, it all depends on what your goals are. So if you're doing a bodybuilding competition, you have to be very, very precise in your macros and your, the timing of when you're eating. Is it around workouts or cardio? What type of, exercises versus the caloric intake? Or if you're just doing, a healthy, active lifestyle, you can be a little bit more lenient. But again, you want to be cognizant on healthy, wholesome food that you're fueling your body to go out on these cool adventures. So I know you can't really see it, but we got a nice flat tortilla. Again, it's not in a perfect circle. That's totally cool there. So we're gonna peel this up so you can kind of see what the dough looks like. Our pan is piping hot. Doesn't take long to fry these things up. So let me grab a plate, set these on. And I'm gonna grab a different spatula from what I'm using to make the taco meat with. When you shave the steak really thin to have that really good kind of like a fajita style cut, it doesn't take long for the meat to cook. And so what it's doing with the lid, you're getting a lot of moisture in there. That spice mixture along with the peppers and onions is really soaking into that meat. So that is gonna be fantastic. So we got the tortilla. It's rocking and rolling in the pan. We're gonna flip it over and it's really starting to have that nice golden brown crisp to it. Again, that pan is nice and hot. So while that's rocking and rolling, we're gonna roll out another tortilla. So kind of spread it out. Like I said, it's in that golf ball size little dough ball, but we're gonna spread that out. And then we're gonna trademark the Yeti spatula here, or the Yeti rolling pin with the cup here. So, that's just part of life. You gotta smile. Things break when you're traveling down the road. It's like a little mini earthquake, so you got to use what you got. So we're using a Yeti cup here. So we got that nice and flat, a little bit of a burrito shape there, but that is perfect. And I think that steak is about done. All right, so let's get a little bit of olive oil here in the pan. Really getting a good sear on that tortilla. We got some cheese. We got some salsa here. If you want, you can always make, homemade guacamole, or even some of like the store-bought stuff. Like try to get that fresh, and you can tell when you go to like a Whole Foods or a Kroger, a Harmon's, you could tell whenever they make that guacamole in-house. Just be careful with the fat content. So avocados, it's a healthy fat. It's gonna be great for your heart, for your joints, for your brain function, cognitive health, but you don't wanna eat too much of it because avocados are very high, high in fat. So just be, we all know when we go out to restaurants, they bring out the chips and the salsa and the giant dish of guac. It's very easy to, overindulge in it. So again, just be careful. A little bit goes a long way. Everything's good. A little bit in moderation here. So, all right. Oh, this one's breaking apart a little bit, but that is all right. So again, really nice dough here, pulls apart. The pan's piping hot, so be careful. We're gonna fry up one more of these. The steak's done, it's hanging out there. And so again, it cooked it right in front of you guys here, so it didn't take too long. it's always good to be prepared. So there was a little bit of preparation beforehand. So schedule that out, be intentional. So depending on what kind of adventures you got going on, or if it's just a cleaning day, or you're just, doing maintenance around the RV, plan out this meal prepping. So kind of plan ahead and then go shopping with the list and, okay, here's the type of meals that we want. Here's what we're doing. That way you're not getting yourself into a bind or surprises and you have to run, to a gas station or go to a restaurant with that, that temptation to get that burger with the fries and the wings and all that kind of stuff. So again, it's all about having fun, being intentional. As far as some of the other taco ingredients, so like I said, we're using, just block of cheese, grating it off, some salsa, like I said about the homemade guac, or even buying that fresh guac that you can get at the grocery store is really good. As far as sour cream and stuff goes, Sarah and I like to use Greek yogurt. You have a little bit of a protein, content in there with having the Greek yogurt, but it's, you don't really taste the difference, if you, as like the normal sour cream. So there's, a little bit of a different taste, but it's a little bit healthier alternative. Like I said, that gives some extra protein for that muscle building. And that is it. So you can see the finished product with the tortillas. So what we're gonna do is take a little bit of cheese here, sprinkle it down. We're gonna make sure we don't burn ourselves on the lid here. So taking the steak, good peppers and onions, that fajita mix here. Throwing a little bit of salsa. And again, it's not a perfect circle, but these are gonna be really great, crispy, that nice golden brown sizzle on the end of these tortillas here. You guys are gonna love them. This looks delicious, so I'm gonna dig in here. And that's all I have, active RVers. So be safe out there on the road, and we're gonna see you on the next adventure.